Hey, you guys. There are some 80s and 90s movies that just hit so hard. Some have memorable characters, others tell intriguing stories, and some have iconic endings. But do you think all of that just kind of happens? These movies are just perfect from the first script? What if I told you there are some absolute classics that came very close to ending completely differently? I'm an 80s and 90s pop culture nerd who spent way too much time digging through movie scripts, storyboards, and director commentaries to uncover the truth. And today, I'm breaking down 10 times that a popular 80s or 90s movie scrapped an ending that they filmed and why the filmmakers pivoted. From studio battles to gut calls, I'll show you how those changes made movie history. My name is Natalie, this is my so-called Gen X life, and here are 10 times that 80s and 90s movies changed their minds. I don't really know if this needs to be said because I'm talking about the endings of movies that are decades old, but this is your spoiler warning. I will be talking about how each of the movies on this list originally ended and then how they actually ended in their theater cuts. So spoilers are everywhere. If you want to know what movies I'll be talking about before watching the rest of this video, there is a list in the description below. 1985's Clue was a murder mystery romp that turned a board game into a comedy gem. It starred Tim Curry as Wadsworth, the butler, herding a pack of oddballs like Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard, and Miss Peacock through a mansion where bodies are dropping like flies. This one is a cult classic, but it took a big, daring swing. Clue did something no movie had done before, or since. Clue had 3 different endings, each with a new killer that were shown randomly in theaters to reflect the game, because any character could be guilty. They even shot a 4th ending that ultimately was axed. So let's unravel the mystery of how Clue played its final hand and why it almost went another way. First, the setup. Clue gathers 6 strangers: Leslie Ann Warren's sultry Miss Scarlet, Martin Mull's bumbling Mustard, Eileen Brennan's haughty Peacock, Christopher Lloyd Professor Plum, and more, for a mysterious dinner party hosted by Mr. Body. When the guests arrive, they are all given those aliases, but it's soon revealed that each one is being blackmailed. Just like the game, a peculiar set of weapons are gifted to each player: a candlestick, a rope, a lead pipe, wrench, revolver, and dagger, and host Mr. Body tells them that someone must kill Wadsworth in order to escape with their secrets. A lively discussion begins, until the lights flicker and a gunshot rings out. Suddenly, Mr. Body, the alleged blackmailer, is dead, and of course, the murderer has to be one of the dinner guests because they were the only people in the house. Mr. Body, however, is just the first to die. He's followed by the cook, the maid Yvette, a cop, a stranded motorist, and a telegram girl. Wadsworth then proceeds to lead a madcap whodunit, piecing together clues, just like you would do when playing the board game. Ultimately, the story dovetails into one of 3 possible outcomes. In theaters in 1985, you may have seen ending A. Miss Scarlet is a mastermind, offing Body, Yvette, and others with help from the maid before she kills her. She then pulls a gun on Wadsworth, who is revealed to be an undercover FBI agent, not a butler, but it's empty, and cops nab her as a chandelier crashes. Or maybe you saw ending B. Mrs. Peacock is the killer, who ices everyone to hide her bribery scandal, but she's busted at the door by Wadsworth, who once again is revealed to be FBI. The third possible ending that was released in theaters had a big plot twist. It spreads the guilt around. Mr. Green, Michael McKean's nervous plant, is an FBI agent. Apart from him, everyone committed murder. Peacock knifed the chef, Plum apparently killed Body, Mustard offs the motorist, Scarlet shoots a cop, White strangles Yvette the maid, and Wadsworth, who reveals himself to be the real Body while holding everyone at gunpoint, kills the telegram girl. So who did Plum kill if it wasn't Body? Well, his victim was the real butler. Wadsworth announces his plans to continue blackmailing them all, and that's when Green draws his own gun and kills him, revealing that he is the undercover FBI agent. Cops swarm, game over. It's chaotic, clever, and a nod to every game of Clue where anyone can be the killer. I should mention at this point that there was a 4th ending that was filmed, according to IMDb, but eventually it was cut because the director just didn't like it. It had Wadsworth as the solo killer of the bunch, explaining that he killed everyone out of the need for perfection in the world, that all of life's consistencies were not good enough. And then he tells the 6 dinner guests that he's poisoned the champagne he served them, so unless they find an antidote in 3 hours, they will die. Police show up soon enough and trap Wadsworth, but he gets away and steals a police car until he realizes that the Doberman from earlier is now in the car and it lunges for him. The police car crashes and Wadsworth is dead. Okay, now let's get back to the 3 endings that were shown in theaters. With the film being released that had 3 different versions, the reviews were mixed and the box office totals were disappointing. Going with 3 different endings was bold but messy. It made Clue a theater gamble. It was fun if you vibed with it, but frustrating if you didn't. But things changed for Clue when it hit physical media. This is when it became a cult classic. For the home video release on VHS, they cleverly recut the film to include all 3 endings shown sequentially as A, B, and C. The first 2 were characterized as possible endings. A was titled How It Could Have Happened, while B was named How About This? And then ending C is what the home video version calls Here's What Really Happened, and that is considered the official ending of the movie. So why 3 endings plus a scrapped 4th? Director Jonathan Lynn, a board game fan, wanted to mirror Clue's randomness. He said every game ends differently, so why not the movie? The studio, which was Paramount, didn't agree. They saw a gimmick, split endings to lure repeat viewers, but it backfired. Audiences didn't trek to different theaters for a different ending. There was no guarantee they would even see a different ending if they did make that effort. And critics like Roger Ebert griped that it felt disjointed. Lynn admits he ditched the poison ending, which was shot in a single day, because it was too grim. It didn't fit the comedy, he said. He felt the Doberman bit was a bit too weird, even for Clue's wackiness. He also worried that it would alienate fans who were expecting a solvable puzzle. It was test screenings that pushed for blending all 3 endings into home video, with those title cards, How It Might Have Happened, How About This, to keep the game's spirit without confusing people. Ultimately, keeping the trio of endings gave Clue its cult edge. Every watch feels like a new game, and that's why we still play along, decades later. I Know What You Did Last Summer is a slasher film from 1997 that was directed by Jim Gillespie and written by Kevin Williamson, who also wrote the screenplay for Scream. The movie stars Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Phillippe, and Freddie Prinze Jr., and it's loosely based on the 1973 novel of the same name by Lois Duncan. It also draws from classic slasher films like 1980's Prom Night and 1982's The House on Sorority Row, and of course, it is also influenced by the urban legend known as The Hook. The movie focuses on a group of 4 teenage friends in North Carolina: Julie James, Ray Bronson, Helen Shivers, and Barry Cox. And the movie opens with the friends returning from a day at the beach on July 4th, 1996. But on the way back, they accidentally hit a pedestrian. Instead of calling for help, Barry and Helen try to dump the body in the water. That's when the pedestrian wakes up and grabs Helen, so Barry pushes him into the water. At that moment, the group swears never to discuss what happened. Cut to 1 year later, when Julie returns home from college for the summer and receives a letter stating, "I know what you did last summer." The group is then stalked by a killer with a hook who somehow knows what they did and wants to make them pay. Fast forward to the end, and the audience got a solid jump scare that takes place a year after Julie and Ray seemingly kill the stalker. The ending that fans know sees Julie at college in Boston, and when she enters the shower, she sees the words, "I still know," written in steam on the shower door. A great ending, and the film was a box office hit, but that's not how the story was supposed to end. The original ending of I Know What You Did Last Summer was pretty lame, and that was on purpose. Back in the early 90s, horror had become a pretty unpopular genre. Audiences weren't going to see them at the theater, and studios were no longer interested in making them. That all changed in 1996 with Wes Craven's Scream, which, like I said earlier, was also written by Williamson. That movie reinvigorated the horror genre. It was such a success that Columbia Pictures, who had once passed on the script for I Know What You Did Last Summer, did a complete 180 and rushed that script into production. Jim Gillespie was hired as the director, and he shot the ending that was on the page. Instead of the shower scene, this ending saw Julie in college receiving a spooky email. Gillespie told Digital Spy in 2017 that he hated filming this ending and intentionally shot it in the dullest way possible. He did this because he knew that the studio wouldn't like it and would ask him to film a better one. His plan worked. The original cut was shown to test audiences, and they were totally into the movie until they saw that dud of an ending. The studio was pretty sure they had a hit on their hand as long as there was a different ending, so they let Gillespie film the one that he wanted. He shot the footage after principal photography was over on a soundstage next door to where Hewitt was filming Party of Five. After the success of I Know What You Did Last Summer, the movie spawned two sequels. Then in 2021, there was a TV series on Amazon that was a modern take on the story, and now, this summer, a new movie will hit theaters with a story that features a younger cast but also includes the characters from the original film. Blade Runner was a 1982 box office bomb that, thanks to home video, became a cultural touchstone. Based on Philip K. Dick's beloved sci-fi novella Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and directed by Ridley Scott, Blade Runner has become incredibly influential in the sci-fi genre, and it's also infamous because of its alternate endings. Thanks to home video and DVD releases in 1992 and 2007, we know what these alternate endings look like, as well as the story behind them. They all hinge on the central question of whether or not Harrison Ford's titled bounty hunter Rick Deckard is himself one of the very outlawed androids he is hunting. First, there's a theatrical cut that the majority of audiences remember, and we need some context about what was going on with big budget sci fi films in the 80s. Back then, films like Blade Runner or David Lynch's Dune or James Cameron's Aliens were initially released to theaters in a form that wasn't what the filmmakers wanted. In the case of Blade Runner, Warner Brothers forced Scott to add annoying narration by Ford throughout the movie to explain certain things that probably didn't need to be explained. As Slash Film describes it, these Captain Obvious voiceovers were used sparingly, but when they were used, they undercut key moments in the film, like the death of Rutger Hauer's Roy Batty. But when it comes to the theatrical cut version, the biggest addition from the studio was the tacked on ending that shows Deckard and the replicant Rachel, played by Sean Young, driving through sunny mountains away from Los Angeles towards freedom. This ending was made with footage that was cobbled together at the last minute via a hasty reshoot with Ford and Young in the spinner car, plus mountain B-roll helicopter footage that was left over from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Gaff had been there and let her live. 4 years, he figured. He was wrong. Tyrell had told me Rachel was special, no termination date. I didn't know how long we'd have together. Who does?
The visuals in that final scene aren't the worst part, though. It's the voiceover. Out of nowhere, it attempts to retcon most of what we were told in the movie about replicant lifespans and the real significance behind the origami unicorn that police officer Gaff, played by Edward James Olmos, left behind. It's a happy and hopeful love conquers all ending that negates the entire tone and mood of Scott's film, and it was nothing like the original work print version from the director that was used with test audiences. Fast forward to May of 1990, and that original work print version started to be covertly shown in a handful of California theaters without Scott's approval. Following the director's extensive notes, film preservationist Michael Eric had put together what became known as the 1992 director's cut of the film based on the work print.
Too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
This new cut eliminated the redundant voiceover and the happy ending. It stopped with the elevator closing on Deckard after he acknowledges Gaff's unicorn, then reinstated some crucial footage, Deckard's unicorn dream. And this is huge when it comes to understanding why Deckard is in fact a replicant himself. Finding the origami unicorn at the end signals that Gaff knows of these dreams, which means Deckard has been implanted because he's a replicant just like Rachel. Gaff leaving the unicorn was a warning that Deckard and Rachel were going to be hunted. With both of these endings now being known to audiences, Ridley released the final cut, and this is the definitive version of Blade Runner. It's very similar to the director's cut, but the final cut was completely supervised by Scott himself. This version reinstates much of the violence that was not part of the 92 cut, and the full-length unicorn version is longer and more pronounced. There are a few more slight tweaks, but it's pretty much an enhanced, more nuanced take on the director's cut. It doesn't alter the meaning of the ending, but it's much more in line with the experience that the filmmakers originally intended. While Deckard still leaves with Rachel, it's unclear how long they stay together or if they even made it out of Los Angeles alive. Their fate is ambiguous, uncomfortable, and raises questions rather than giving answers, like all of the best science fiction. Blade Runner: The Final Cut is generally held up as an example of a revisit to a beloved film that was done right. And one more thing. The inevitable question of whether or not Deckard was a replicant had to be addressed in Denis Villeneuve's 2017 sequel, Blade Runner 2049. Ford's mere presence as Deckard, having aged like a normal human being, raised questions as to what kind of replicant Deckard is. Filmmakers decided to skirt around it instead of directly addressing the issue. They left it open-ended and allowed viewers to choose their own adventure. Which version of Blade Runner was it a sequel to? Well, this is what screenwriter Michael Green said in an interview with Collider. The fact that it's a question is what's important. The puzzle of Blade Runner, one of the many reasons it's the classic it is that the chasing for authenticity is both baked into the narrative of the story and the meta-narrative of the film, that there is no authentic answer to that question. Which just meant that telling the further story, that had to be baked into the story as well, that everyone who watches it has that question of which version should I watch? What does that mean? And the answer is, you don't get to know. First Blood is a 1982 film starring Sylvester Stallone that is based on the 1972 novel by David Morrell. It follows a PTSD-stricken war veteran named John Rambo, played by Stallone, who is mistaken for a hippie drifter by the local sheriff of a small mountain town, played by Brian Dennehy. But instead of accepting the sheriff's abuse, Rambo fights back and takes out his pent-up rage on the local residents. The context of the story is important because the movie came out about a decade after the end of the Vietnam conflict, when Americans were starting to come to terms with the failure of that whole mess. The country was ready to move on, while essentially ignoring or discarding the plight of the veterans, many of which were suffering greatly. First Blood was about that American apathy, and it was a bitter indictment of it, while also being a tribute to those young men who lost everything in Vietnam's blood-soaked jungles. In the memorable final scene, Rambo and his former commanding officer, Sam Troutman, played by Richard Crenna, finally confront each other face to face. Troutman tries to convince Rambo to end his rampage, telling him, "It's over, Johnny, it's over." But that assurance causes Rambo to have an emotional breakdown, while reflecting on his actions in Vietnam. Rambo says, "Nothing is over." It's a powerful moment for both Rambo as a character as well as Stallone as an actor.
I can't get it out of my head. I do this 7 years. Every day it happens. Sometimes I wake up, I don't know where I am. I don't talk to anybody. Sometimes a day. Sometimes a week. I can't put it out of my mind.
The movie ends with Rambo turning himself over to Troutman's custody and he's arrested. But this ending wasn't consistent with the source material, and it wasn't the first ending shot for the movie. The original ending of First Blood follows the novel, and it's much more tragic. Instead of going peacefully into custody, Rambo calmly grabs Troutman's M1911 pistol and quietly asks for death.
sometimes you get so mad you think you're going crazy. Then it goes away, that hot feeling. It's not going away anymore, and I can't control it, Colonel. And I can't spend the rest of my life in a cell either. If I gotta die, I want you to do it. Don't let them do it. You trained me. You made me. You kill me. You owe me that. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
According to director Ted Kotcheff, he had his own vision for the movie. He told Entertainment Weekly that he did a lot of research with Vietnam veterans and noted how poorly they were treated compared to veterans of previous wars. He also called Vietnam a very stupid war based on a stupid idea, and a lot of veterans felt horrible and guilty because of it. Both sides of the political spectrum vilified and rejected Vietnam vets, so when they came home, they found there was no place for them. This is what happens to Rambo, which is why Kotcheff conceived of First Blood as Rambo's suicide mission. We shot it. It was incredibly moving. After all we'd been through, Sylvester got up and said, "Ted, can I talk to you for a second?" He said, "You know, Ted, we put this character through so much. The police abuse him. He's pursued endlessly. Dogs are sent after him. He jumps off cliffs. He runs through freezing water. He's shot in the arm and he has to sew it up himself. All this, and now we're going to kill him?" Stallone's words confirmed what Kotcheff had been thinking while shooting the film. He looked at the story, understanding that the quintessential American town that Rambo finds himself in was emblematic of the whole United States. He's being treated like an enemy, so he returns the failure and wrecks the whole town. I thought to then have him kill himself means the enemy would have won. That town would have killed him. By this time, the audience had gotten the message. Did they need me to excessively pile it on? Right away, the director says the new ending just popped into his head and he knew exactly what to do. We cut away from the scene just before the colonel pulls the gun out. They come out of the police station. They start to walk down the steps. I'll pan over to the ambulance and see the sheriff being loaded into the ambulance. He's been shot, but not killed. We go back to Sylvester. All one shot. He's so happy he didn't kill him. The camera pans over, follows them as they go onto the street. The whole townspeople are there. They'll look at him. He'll look at them. They'll end up on a Jeep and drive off. All one long camera shot. And Sylvester loved it. So I said, okay guys, I lined it all up. The new ending was such a sudden idea that they shot it on the same day they filmed the original, despite objections from the producers. After the movie was picked up by Orion Films, they decided to have a test screening with the original ending where Rambo shoots himself to see how the audience would respond. They were unanimous. They said, quote, "This is the best action film I've ever seen, but the ending is horrible." With such universal disapproval for the original ending, everyone agreed to change it to the one we know today. And the rest, as they say, is history. Fatal Attraction is a 1987 psychological thriller that was the year's third highest grossing film. Plus, it grabbed 6 Oscar nominations, including one for Best Picture. Starring Michael Douglas and Glenn Close, the movie is an adaptation of the 1980 short film Diversion, and wow, did it strike a chord with audiences. The movie took its one-night stand narrative setup to extreme lengths, sending chills down the spine, and it capped off with an iconic, shocking ending. But the ending that we saw in theaters was not the one that director Adrian Lyne and writer James Dearden originally intended. Thanks to the reaction of test audiences, Paramount Pictures insisted that Lynn shoot a new ending, much to the chagrin of the embattled director and star Glenn Close. Fatal Attraction tells the story of a married man named Dan Gallagher, an attorney who cheats on his wife with a colleague named Alex Forrest. Right away, Dan discovers how mentally unstable Alex is and ends the affair, which leads to Alex stalking him and his family. By the end of the movie, Dan's wife Beth, played by Ann Archer, forgives Dan for his affair. She's at home preparing to take a bath when Alex suddenly attacks her with a knife. Dan rushes upstairs and protects his wife by seemingly drowning Alex in the bathtub, but she emerges one more time swinging the knife, forcing Beth to shoot her dead. The ending is iconic, almost as much as the bunny scene from earlier in the film, but this is not how Fatal Attraction originally ended. The first ending that was shot concluded the film with Alex framing Dan for her murder, but the truth was that she took her own life and left behind evidence that ultimately would clear his name. It was far less sensational and cathartic for audiences. It created a lingering, uneasy sense of anticlimactic ambiguity surrounding Dan and Alex's affair.
Excuse me, you said homicide?
That's right.
What does this have to do with Alex Forrest?
You saw her last night.
I told the lieutenant that, yes. Why? What'd she say?
You're not saying very much, Mr. Gallagher. She's dead.
She what?
That's right.
Oh, God. Oh, how? Well, how did she... I was angry. I meant that. The woman kidnapped my daughter. My wife was in the hospital. I didn't kill her. She was crazy. She already tried to kill herself.
My experience, a woman who wants to kill herself doesn't cut her throat with a 9-inch kitchen knife.
There's some kind of misunderstanding. I want you to call Arthur right away, okay?
Mr. Gallagher.
I'll be right there, all right? Just a minute. His number's upstairs in my book. Tell him what's happened and that I need
Gallagher,
him.
let's move really high.
What has happened?
Alex Forrest is dead.
I'm sorry, your husband's under arrest.
Nothing else left for me, Dan. You're my last chance, Dan. If you don't come through for me, I don't know what I'll do.
Instead of portraying Alex as a woman driven to homicide, the original ending suggested mental illness and outright despair. It made her much more tragic and added way more depth to the character. At the same time, Dan is arrested in relation to Alex's suicide, which forces him into a level of accountability. He's obviously innocent of murder, but he has to confront his role in Alex's death. It's a much more open-ended conclusion where Dan must face scrutiny for his actions. The problem with this ending was that it didn't sit well with anyone who watched it. It refused to clearly define the concepts of good, bad, and justice, and the test audience wasn't having it. When Fatal Attraction was screened for test audiences, there was major disapproval of the ending. They wanted to see Alex get what she deserved. As executive Ned Tannen noted, quote, "They want us to terminate the bitch with extreme prejudice," end quote. As a result of the test screenings, Tannen proposed a major narrative revision, but both Lynn and Close objected to the change. Lynn was repulsed by the idea of an ending where Alex was shot and killed. The only reason he agreed to do it was an offer of $1.5 million to shoot the new scenes. Convincing Close, though, was much more difficult. She felt sympathy for her character because Alex was a woman battling mental illness. She wanted to resist cliches about another female psycho. Close categorically refused to do the reshoot until she talked it over with Douglas and fellow actor William Hurt. According to the book Leading Lady, a biography from the former head of Paramount Pictures, Sherry Lansing, Close screamed at Douglas, asking him how he would feel if they did this to his character. Meanwhile, Hurt bluntly responded to Close's opposition by telling her, "You've made your point. Now it's your responsibility to buck up and just do it." Close later said, "The audience wanted to believe that the family might be able to survive, so they got their catharsis by shedding my blood." In the last scene, in the new ending, was the camera going to the family. For decades, Close has defended her initial vision for the character of Alex, a woman struggling with mental health due to childhood abuse. She did tons of research and developed an intricate backstory for the character, which explained her actions in the movie, but she understands the movie was a thriller, not a meditation on mental health. So how would she approach the story today? Close says, "I think it would be wonderful to write that kind of a story from her point of view. That, I think, would be really interesting." Little Shop of Horrors is a 1986 cult classic, but the ending we know isn't faithful at all to the popular stage musical. The film starred Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, Vincent Gardenia, Steve Martin, and the voice of Levi Stubbs, along with special appearances by John Candy, Bill Murray, Christopher Guest, and Jim Belushi. Like I said, it's a classic with a killer cast. You're probably familiar with Little Shop of Horrors, but what you may not know is that there are many different versions of the story. First, there was the 1960 film, directed by Roger Corman and written by Charles B. Griffith. The unique tale was designed to be a farce. It was so popular with audiences that it led to a musical adaptation from famed composer Alan Menken and playwright Howard Ashman. The rock musical maintained Griffith's original story, but the catchy music and theatrical flair was arguably an improvement to the original film. Debuting in 1982, Little Shop of Horrors has since become a staple in musical theater and is still performed consistently to this day. With that kind of success, a movie adaptation was inevitable. Directed by Frank Oz, the 1986 movie is arguably the most well-known iteration of the story, but it's an adaptation of the 82 musical, not a reboot of the 1960 film. And there are actually a few differences between the 86 movie, the 82 stage adaptation, and the 1960 film. But for this video, we're going to focus on the ending. The ending from the 86 movie that we all know sees Audrey 2 out of control, demanding more and more blood. Seymour is desperate to control his monster, so he leaves Mushniks to find another meal for the plant. At the same time, Audrey 2 lures Audrey to the shop to eat her, but Seymour returns in time before Audrey is eaten, and he electrocutes Audrey 2 to save humanity. Everything ends on a positive note, and Seymour and Audrey live happily ever after. This happy conclusion wasn't always the plan, though. Oz wanted a much different ending, a dark ending actually, and that wouldn't have been out of step with the franchise. In fact, it would have fit perfectly, because Little Shop of Horrors had always ended in a dark manner, until the 1986 movie. Oz's 86 adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors was supposed to end with Audrey 2 taking over the world. The plant demands that Seymour find him another human sacrifice, and when he runs off to find one, Audrey 2 attacks Audrey, but in this ending, Seymour does not save her. On her deathbed, Audrey asks Seymour to feed her to the plant so he can maintain his success. He does what she asks, but still tries to kill Audrey 2, who then eats Seymour. Without a keeper, Audrey 2 plants are sold around the world, and the movie ends with the species killing all of humankind. This may sound grim, but check out how the 1960 version ended. In that version, Seymour and Audrey Jr. find great success among the public, but the police are suspicious of Seymour. At Mushnik, Seymour is honored for his work, and Audrey Jr.'s buds open, revealing the faces of the people that the plant ate. The police chase Seymour so they can arrest him for murder, but he outruns them and tries to kill Audrey Jr. The movie ends with the plant dying, but one final bud opens to reveal Seymour's face. Even though he killed the plant, he was also one of the victims. The ending of the 82 musical is equally dark. It established Seymour running out to grab Audrey 2 another meal, and Audrey being lured into the plant's trap. It also showed Seymour being too late to save Audrey and agreeing to feed her to Audrey 2. So why did Oz change the ending of the 86 film? Well, it was because test audiences didn't like it. Even though it would have made sense to go dark, like the 1960 film and the 82 musical, audiences were rooting for Seymour and Audrey. Seeing them both die at the end was incredibly upsetting, not to mention Audrey 2 taking over the world. Like we've seen in previous entries on this list, audiences really want justice. So even though Little Shop of Horrors is supposed to be an outrageous tragedy, the audiences wanted a happy ending. Despite Oz wanting to maintain the original, they decided to change it to keep the audience satisfied. Back in 1994, a 24-year-old Jersey guy named Kevin Smith dropped Clerks, a scrappy indie flick about two slackers, Dante and Randall, screwing around at a quick stop. This one is a cult classic for Gen X, but man, did it almost end on a way darker note. Instead of the chill vibe that we know and love, Smith shot a gut punch of an ending for the original cut of the film that could have tanked the whole thing. So, how do we get the Clerks that we know? Clerks follows Dante Hicks, played by Brian O'Halloran, who's stuck working a convenience store shift he didn't sign up for.
I'm not even supposed to be here today!
There's also Randall, played by Jeff Anderson, his movie buff pal that works and goofs off at the VHS rental store next door. Throughout the movie, they riff on life, love, and Star Wars. It's peak 90s slacker stuff. Their conversations are interrupted only by customers coming and going, girlfriends and ex-girlfriends showing up, and friends like Jay and Silent Bob stopping by. Smith, who scraped by on a $27,000 budget to make this movie via maxed out credit cards and selling both his car and comic book collection, shot the footage at the real quick stop where he worked. The final cut we know ends with a shrug. Dante closes up, he and Randall walk off, a bit wiser and ready for tomorrow. It's messy, open-ended, and perfect. No big drama, just life.
Want me to do anything before I get out of here, man?
Why don't you wrangle for me?
No.
Come on, just wrangle out the door.
No.
Come on.
No.
Here comes Randall, he's a berserker. Na, 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 na.
You're closed.
But Smith had other ideas at first, and he actually filmed a brutal twist to the story. Originally, the movie's final scene, which was viewed at the Sundance Film Festival, showed Dante locking up when a random robber storms in, shoots him dead, and grabs the cash and bolts.
Did you forget something? Oh, I'm sorry, we're closed.
Fans may have heard this part of the story before, but what you may not know is that there was actually a scripted setup to this ending. It was never shot, but Kevin Smith talked about it in an X post along with a screenshot of the original script. In the scene, a junkie named John tries to score drugs from Jay outside the quick stop, but doesn't have enough cash, so he later mugs Dante and shoots him dead at the end. When Smith shared this early draft on X, he called it the Snyder cut of Clerks. Another draft had Randall shot too, but that didn't make it to the film either. So why did the movie take such a sudden grim turn? Well, Smith admitted he was clueless on endings. In the DVD commentary, he says, "I just didn't know how to wrap it up." He was thinking that a shock might add some depth. So that begs the question, why did Smith end up ditching this original ending? The biggest reason behind the change came from feedback at Sundance. Audiences told Smith that he needed to keep it light because the dark ending felt like a betrayal of the movie's vibe. It was like Smith was trying to say something heavy about dead-end jobs, but completely missed the mark. So he cut the scene and opted for Dante and Randall's walk-off instead. It's not profound, but it fits. Two buddies still figuring it out. The murder ending might have worked for a gritty crime flick, but Clerks? That's about banter, not body bags. Keeping it chill with the humor and heart shine. Nobody needed Dante dead to get the point. It's a lesson in knowing your story's soul. That choice turned Clerks into the indie darling we still quote, spawning sequels, a TV pilot, and even a cartoon. Do I really need to recap Terminator 2 Judgment Day? This 1991 sequel to Terminator is generally regarded as the best film in the franchise, possibly the best sequel ever made. And for me, it's the end of the story. We don't need to acknowledge any film but the first two, right? And honestly, if the movie would have ended the way James Cameron first intended, it would have been the end of the franchise. So we all know that Terminator 2 flipped the first film on its head and inverted the character dynamics, while fleshing out details of the impending android apocalypse. T2 revolves around Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor, who is committed to a psych ward after the events of the first film. Her violent insistence the nuclear apocalypse will occur on August 29, 1997, has everyone thinking she's crazy. So she's been committed, and her son John, played by Edward Furlong, is now living with a foster family. And he is the new target of Skynet. The AI entity sends a new T-1000 Terminator, played by Robert Patrick, back in time to assassinate John because he's the future leader of the human resistance against the machines. At the same time, John sends back a reprogrammed T-800, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, a Model 101 Terminator to protect his younger self and his mother. It's a film about John, Sarah, and the T-800 preventing the apocalypse, but it also dares to ask a much bigger question. Is fate something that can be controlled? The movie ends with the trio successfully defeating the T-1000 by submerging it in molten steel. They are overjoyed with their victory, until they realize they must also destroy Arnold's T-800 in order to prevent Skynet from rising to power. In one of the most heartbreaking scenes of the franchise, the Terminator says goodbye to John with a thumbs up as he's turned into mush in the liquid steel and his operating system shuts down. Sarah cradles John in her arms as the film cuts to a desolate, dark road with the glare of headlights.
The unknown future rolls toward us. I face it for the first time with a sense of hope. Because if a machine, a Terminator, can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too.
The ending is cautiously optimistic, just like the first Terminator. Both films end with Sarah being hopeful but also resilient and ready. But that's not what Cameron originally had in mind. As he wrote the original script, he planned to do a full circle from the beginning. The opening would show a playground in the future being destroyed, and in the end, that same playground on the same date would be fine. In the alternate ending to T2, we see a future where Judgment Day never happens, and Sarah and John Connor are living peaceful lives. Sarah becomes a grandmother, and John becomes a U.S. Senator. The final scene is set in 2029, and it sees Sarah watching John and his daughter playing on a playground in Washington, D.C.
August 29th, 1997 came and went. Nothing much happened. Michael Jackson turned 40. There was no Judgment Day. People went to work as they always do. Laughed, complained, watched TV, made love. I wanted to run through the street yelling, to grab them all and say, every day from this day on is a gift. Use it well. The luxury of hope was given to me by the Terminator. Because if a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too.
This ending ties everything up in a neat little bow, and it ends the Terminator franchise for good, leaving no room for any more sequels. And honestly, I wish that's the ending we would have gotten. But James Cameron changed his mind. Apparently this was too hopeful of an ending, too saccharine sweet. The Terminator films were soaked in embittered nihilism, and we couldn't have a sanitized ending to the story. Cameron said that his original ending was totally unconnected to the rest of the film. There was a sense of, why tie it up with the bow? If the future is changeable, then the battle is something which has to be fought continuously. So, 2 days before the film was to go to print, the decision was made to change the ending. Instead of a finite ending on a happy note, which again I think was the much better choice, Cameron opted for the darker ending that was more in line with the tone of everything that had happened before it. The oil-slick streets that Sarah drives down in the theatrical cut could be the road forward, or maybe it's the path to inevitable human downfall. I get why Cameron made this choice, but I highly recommend a double feature rewatch of Terminator and Terminator 2 with the sequel's original ending. It's a much more satisfying movie watching experience, and it shuts the door on the cash grabs that came later. 1997's Titanic is probably one of the most timeless epic romances in movie history. For years, it was the highest grossing film of all time, and it made huge stars out of Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. Not to mention the fact that for months, no one could go anywhere without hearing Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On. I doubt there's a Gen Xer alive who doesn't know the plot of Cameron's Titanic. The director frames it as a treasure hunt in 1996, where salvager Brock Levitt, played by Bill Paxton, and his crew are searching for a massive blue diamond known as the Heart of the Ocean, which supposedly went down with the Titanic. In a safe where they expect to find the diamond, they instead find a drawing of a nude woman wearing it, and that's when they connect with the subject of the drawing, an elderly socialite named Rose, to fill them in on her Titanic experience back in 1912. In the ending that we all know, the theatrical version, the story is over and we were back in 1996. Rose slips out of bed on the salvage boat, quietly pulls the Heart of the Ocean out of her pocket, and throws it into the water. Turns out she kept it all along to remember her doomed romance with Jack. She didn't tell Brock or his crew or her granddaughter Lizzie. Then she goes back to bed and dies in her sleep to reunite with Jack. Or maybe she dreams of 1912. I know it's a matter of interpretation. But that's not how Titanic was originally supposed to end. In the longer original ending, Brock and Lizzie see Rose on the deck approaching the railing and they think she's about to jump overboard. They confront her and she warns them not to come any closer. She threatens to drop the Heart of the Ocean necklace which she is holding in her hand. Brock is shocked to find out she's had it the entire time. Then there's some cheesy dialogue where Brock tries to barter for the necklace.
You had it the entire time?
The hardest part about being so poor was being so rich. But every time I thought about selling it, I thought of Cal. And somehow, I made it without his help.
Look, Rose, I don't know what to say to a woman who tries to jump off the Titanic when it's not sinking and then jumps back on when it is. I'm not dealing with logic here, I know that, but please, think about this for a second.
Oh, I've thought about this for years. And I've come all the way here to put it back where it belongs.
Wait, just let me hold it in my hand. Please. Just once.
You look for treasure in the wrong place, Mr. Lovett. Only life is priceless, and making each day count.
That really sucks, lady! Very funny. That's just great. Meanwhile, I'm gonna call my wife and tell her, sorry, honey.
Would you like to dance?
This original ending reflects the themes of the movie and allows Brock to finally move on from all of the time that he spent obsessively searching for the diamond. The problem is, it's not only redundant, it's basically telling the audience what is happening word for word. In the grand scheme of things, the necklace means nothing, and Brock should focus on the things that are right in front of him. As for the redundancy, this original ending is pretty much another way to communicate what the audience just saw in the previous scene. When Brock is talking to Lizzie while the submersibles are being loaded back into the vessel, he has the same cigar from the beginning of the movie when they found the safe. He chucks it overboard and says, 3 years I thought of nothing except the Titanic, but I never got it. I never let it in. In the final cut of the film, the ending that we know, we get that final scene with Brock before Rose has her moment to herself. They both have something physical to let go of. Rose has the diamond, Brock has a cigar. Both items end up in the same place. So now the question is, why did Cameron change it? We don't know exactly why he chose to change the ending of Titanic, but we do know that he avoided possibly one of the greatest misfires in movie history. First off, there's the tone. The official ending that we know is a moment of quiet closure for Rose as James Horner's ethereal score plays in the background. It puts the emphasis on Rose and her emotions and focuses on the movie's love story that we just witnessed over the last 3 hours. The alternate ending almost feels like a parody of the final scene. For a brief moment, this epic romance turns into a comedy. Rose has almost an evil smile on her face as she tosses the necklace into the water, taunting Brock for his greed. It was basically everything Cameron wanted to say, but shouldn't say out loud. Subtext is all that was needed. We know that Brock shouldn't have the heart of the ocean. We also know that Rose needs to unburden herself the weight of it and move on. This original ending wasn't the way to go about it. Brock wasn't really a character in the story that needs a resolution. He was the audience. Titanic was Rose's story, her romantic saga. The ending needed to be through her eyes, not Brock's. There was no need to cram more message into the movie's closing moments.
And there you have it. 10 movies from the 80s and 90s that changed their minds. Let me know what you think in the comments. And thank you so much to my channel members for your support. I could not make these videos without you. Okay, bye!